Welcome to Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I'll be covering every studio song the band has recorded and every bonus track that I can find. Each week we'll go over a new song from the beginning to where they are currently, and as they keep adding albums, I'll keep adding shows. Let the deep dive party begin.
In the magic garden, some were singing, some were dancing.
Well, we got to talk about that solo.
All right. So what we have is Ken Hensley doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's doing it on, it's obviously a humbucker guitar. Maybe it's a Les Paul with P90s or an SG with P90s or with standard humbuckers. I don't think it's a Marshall. I think he's running through a pedal. And I think it's, sometimes these studio recordings are deceiving as to the size of the amplifier that they use. Some people swear I've got to get that sound, so they'll crank up this thing in the studio on 11. I don't think they did that here. But that's definitely Ken. That's definitely the way he played back then. So definitely, yeah.
It's a beautiful solo, and what I really love about it, besides the performance, is the tonality of the guitar. You've got enough distortion to really give it a crispness, but not so much that it sounds heavy. And the frequencies, again, they're masters of bordering on the edge of, if we push the EQ any further, it would be annoying and pierce your ears. But we ride that line so perfectly, it sounds fantastic.
Yeah, there's not a lot of middle in there. It's there's high and low, and there's a very little middle punch. I think they EQ'd the middle out of it, so it had that sustain, but it wasn't grinding. It wasn't like a brittle sound at all. It was very, very full, and I think it's a pedal versus an overdrive on an amp.
Yeah, I would say you're probably right. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see what happens next, because I have a feeling we're going to get some vocals pretty soon. I'm going to go back to the solo, but let's get the 10-pound elephant in the room out of the way. That is David Byron on vocals.
Yes.
Okay. Because there's always that I think it's him, or I could be Ken, because in a way they sound very similar.
They do at times. I'm sure that's David Byron. He was spot on tonality. He was spot on the note.
Yeah. He has a way of delivering such an emotion to everything he sings that, it's one of those, there's singers that can sing the notes and they can sing fine, but there's other people that can deliver a story. And I've always felt that that's what David does.
Very powerful voice when he wanted it to be. And this is one of those places where he approached his power, but it wasn't anywhere near screaming or anything, obviously, because he just had a very strong, powerful voice.
Right. And his pitches are amazing.
Yep.
Absolutely. I would love to have been in the writing session for a song like this and really heard how they fleshed out the idea. What was David's interpretation of it? And then Ken saying, well, you could do that, but, how much interaction did they have? Who, how did they come together to write something like this? Because this song is magic to me.
Yeah, unfortunately, we'll never know. But there are alternate tracks available, and sometime who knows if somewhere someone will surface something where they have two people talking in the control room and trying to figure out who's saying what they said, and maybe we'll find out some of these answers. But there's a lot of material out there we haven't heard yet, I'm sure.
And as some of that stuff has surfaced for bands like the Beatles, it's been really interesting to hear how they interacted together, and it wasn't always so friendly.
Succeeded only in disguise. Now and then you find a bridge to cross, reach the other side, and you'd still be lost, evaded by the sweet smell of life.
I want to talk real quick about what the bass is doing, because the bass is playing some really lovely low notes that round this out, since everything else is so mid and high range. What do you think of the bass on this one?
I think John Wetton really nailed it. It's definitely different than Gary Thane would have done. Gary had a much rounder sound, I think. This is more modern sounding to me than what Gary sounded like on most things. Not quite as melodic, because he used to bounce all over the place and come down with like with these descending rolls, these descending chordal things that he would do to get down to the bass notes. John's more straightforward. Definitely fits the tune, and there's some parts in there coming up where he'll do some high fretting a little bit to get, and then slide down to get down to the bottom. I'm not a bass player, but I think that nobody probably could have done it better than the way he did it, because it's perfect. I think it really fits.
I really like the fact that he's a little more laid back in this section and just adding a little bit more bottom end than you would normally hear. Like you said, in a Uriah Heep song, I joke with Paul Newton all the time about what adventurous bass players these guys are, up and down the strings a lot more than you hear in most bands. But I really like it. I love those really low notes that he's playing. I think this song didn't need anything to overpower.
No, it's not that. It's not that kind of song. And the guitars are, in the beginning where they were all echoey and they're having delays on them. And when he's playing now, I think that thing is almost totally dry. It's just coming out of the amplifier.
Yeah. It barely has any reverb on it. Even it's very clean.
Hardly at all.
It probably just room reverb, honestly.
Could be. Yep.
Do you know if Ken in general, did he write his solos out, or was he more of a spontaneous guitarist?
I would tend to think he'd be spontaneous, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. It kind of feels like these were planned. Like I still feel the solo. It doesn't feel like I have to play this and then this. It's very natural, but it feels like it just fits the song so perfectly.
I think when you're in a band and you write music and you start to play a certain thing a certain way, it becomes the way it is. And you've done the same song 10 times, learning it together, and you've buttoned up a solo in a certain spot. That's the way the solo is going to be presented when the record comes out. And I don't think he necessarily wrote it out, but they may have figured it out together. I tend to think not, though. I think he just went in there and just did it. It's encompassed in a set of chords that make it really easy to noodle in. And I think he was just noodling along in there the way he did play. And it fits the top and the bottom of the chord structure, and he's got freedom. He can do whatever he wants to do.
Exactly. And those are the kind of solos to me that most often come out the best.
I think so.
The ones that what you're feeling in the moment is what you play. That's what the song's inspiring you to do. The audience or the listener is going to feel that.
Right. And that's what this solo sounds like to me. He knew what he wanted to do. He was comfortable where he was doing it and just continued to do it in the same style for every solo on this song.
Yeah, I would agree. Very cool. Okay, so let's talk about these beautiful harmonies of Uriah Heep that really, I mean, there's a couple of bands that are really good at harmonies. You look at bands like Three Dog Night, masters of it. But what Heep does, the layers of the vocals that they have, it's every song that they do it in, it just blows me away how good it sounds and how clever the placement, when they go with that extra high harmony, when they don't. It's amazing to me.
Trademark. That's part of their trademark. They always had great vocal harmonies, and they were proud of that, and they are proud of that now. I mean, Phil and Bernie, even Mick gets in there, and Russell. I'm not sure if Russell sings at all, but I know Davey Rimmer does, and they're proud of their harmonies. Being the Beach Boys of rock and roll, of heavy rock, heavy metal, harmonies are a big deal with Heep, and it started here.
Yeah.
So yeah, sure. They are beautifully well done.
Now, I've heard a lot. I've tried to research this, and maybe you'll know and maybe you won't, but I've heard that Lee Kerslake was the one that did the high harmonies. I've heard that Mick was the one that did the high harmonies. I've heard they switched off. Do you have any insight into who did what?
I think that David and Ken did high harmonies as well as Lee. I don't think Mick was in there on the high parts. He was more of a middle person. That's my opinion. Lee had a wonderful voice. Really, I mean, he's a seriously great singer, and I don't think he got way up there though. But I know Ken and David did, and you really couldn't tell which one was which sometimes. But they were definitely up there together.
What really blows my mind about Lee Kerslake is how well he sounded being such a big guy, because you would think that he would be more baritone or just not have the sustaining power because of his body type. But he actually really was a great singer.
He was for sure.
Yeah. Did you get to know him at all?
I met him a few times. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Went to his house a couple of times. Yeah.
The impression that I got from everybody, and Paul Newton had said to me, he said, "Oh, you would have loved him." I just kind of get the feeling like everybody that met him was like, "I like this guy."
I was in New York with him 3 days before the Twin Towers were attacked in the United States in Manhattan. We had a meeting. And at the end of the meeting, I went back to Cleveland. He stayed there for some things he had to do. And he was there when the planes got hit. But we had partied the evening before I left. I'll tell you, this boy could party. We had a great time. I won't go into details, but there were 5 of us, and it was really, really fun. And I'll never forget that. He was really something. He was a great entertainer, both on stage and off.
I believe that. I don't know what it is with drummers. I read that account that Mick had posted about hanging out with Keith Moon from The Who. And I thought, boy, I'm just glad he survived that night, because Keith could party. Yep.
So can Mick, by the way.
Really? He just seems like such a calm guy. It's hard for me to picture that, but I know him more now. And through, in those days, I knew him through photographs. So you don't really get a sense of a person through photographs.
This is true. Yeah. I agree.
Well, let's see what happens next.
All right, let's go.
I really like the way that they're panning those little bits of vocals here, where they're kind of like, I'm saying something, and then the person agreeing is more sitting on your shoulder. And then you have everybody coming in and agreeing with that point. I really love the way that they pan this.
I do too, and I think that the weirdness of the chords, that those descending chords from the organ are bouncing off of those luscious, beautiful vocals. So it's got a kind of a strange feel for me, anyways. That they're almost singing in a major key, I think, but the chords on the organ as it descends down through that little section is minor, and it's crystal clear, and it's kind of like just going down this little precipice down to the ground, and the bass is following him, and the vocals are sort of opposed to that. It's a really pretty section of the song. I really like it that way.
It is. And what it does for me is it makes me feel like the storyteller is really isolated in their own world and can't connect to the rest of the world. I realize I'm getting a little philosophical, but
I totally agree with you, though. That feels like they're alone doing this.
Exactly. And given the story that we're being told, and we haven't really talked about lyrics, but given the story, it fits so perfectly to have a sound like that.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, for sure. You nailed that one.
Nice. I win.
You win.
Well, let's see where we go from here.
I thought you were so wise, succeeded only in disguise. Now and then you find a bridge to cross, reach the other side, and you'd still be lost, evaded by the sweet smell of life. While you're with them, we've been silent. Now with them, we've been silent. We've been silent.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It really makes me wish I knew where those vocals were going, because he's starting to sing in a higher register, adding some accents, and I'm kind of like, I want to hear where that went.
Yeah. I hear a delay in the guitar now, in the lead guitar. He's got some kind of a slap in there, very, very quick, maybe 2 millisecond slap to go along with it. It's broader than it was, I think, earlier in the song.
Yeah, I think that just came in that last section, though. I don't think I heard that before. The song in general is actually very dry on the whole. Even the drums don't sound very, very reverbed.
Now, he may have some kind of a post. I think they did that post recording. They added that because it definitely is in there.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful section of the song. He simply is just noodling around, doing the same riffs over and over, but changing them each time a little bit. It's really pretty.
Yeah, and the emotion that you feel coming from the guitar equals the emotion that you feel from the vocals.
Yeah.
And that's a hard balance to find sometimes, because one tends to override the other one, but it just flows so beautifully. You really don't lose emotion at any point during the song.
It's that kind of song where if you wanted to go on another 10 minutes and build it up and just have a guitar solo that sang for 10 more minutes, you could do it on this kind of a song. It just repeats, and it never loses intensity, and it never loses emotion.
Yeah, I'll have to ask Mick if they ever played it live, because I have to say that this is the kind of song that you could go on for a long time on stage.
Yeah. It's a real, like a lead guitar solo song, if you wanted it to be, sure.
Mm-hmm, for sure, yeah. And then you couple it with those beautiful vocals, and then, a solid drummer that doesn't need to show off in this song. He's really playing for the song and not for himself. And that's one of the things I've loved about Lee's playing, is that he's not a selfish drummer by any means.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also, there's a lack of distortion coming off the organ. This is just clean as a whistle.
Yeah.
So he's not, there's no competition for the spectrum, for the sound spectrum at all. It's all guitar now at this point.
Mm-hmm. And everything's very well placed as far as panning goes. I feel it's really well balanced. A lot of these songs, the way they're mixed, I feel like I need to lean to one side or the other because the balance just isn't there. But on this one, I think it's nailed 100%.
Well, you know what they did? I mean, if you listen carefully, it's the same guitar in both ears. There's an extreme right and extreme left, and it's the same track. It might be maybe that's where the delay is coming from. Maybe they've got like a millisecond between the right and the left.
Well, that
but
could be.
but it's not in the middle. It's coming out of right and left.
Right. But normally what we would have is we would have organ on the right side, guitar on the left side. It would be, one would be overriding the other, and it just wouldn't feel balanced. But this mix is just perfect.
I think so too.
Yeah. Very
That's
cool.
why I love this song so much. It's just a cool song.
Mm-hmm. Well, I sure appreciate you coming on and going through this song. I'm really glad to share this one with you because it is, I think, one of their best as far as emotional content. It feels like a song that a hard rock band could do and get away with without people going, hey, what are these guys doing now? They can't be writing songs like that. I feel it really fits into their overall song base.
At that time, absolutely. They were doing these kinds of things. You know, the track before this, excuse me, and the ones after this were in the same vein. Not like this song. You know, they didn't sound like this song, but they're clear, they're clean, they're very unheavy on the organ. That's the style they were into at this point.
Right. Another thing I really like about this song is that while it's very emotional, it's not brooding. Like, it's kind of on the border of, if they dropped it down any more, it might be too much. But again, it's like they just find that right spot to sit the song in, and it makes it great.
Yeah, it's very well produced for sure.
Yeah, very much so. Wow. Well, thank you, Dave. I really appreciate it. And I hope that you'll come back and do another song with us.
I'd love to.
I got quite a few to go yet.
I know you do.
And then before I get caught up, hopefully they'll have the next album out, if not a second one by then. Who knows with the way this is going? I've heard that Italy has gone back on lockdown again. Yeah.
Oh, no.
I mean, who knows if it's true? We get a lot of just people saying things, but I mean, I don't know.
I
where
normally
things are
stay
at.
up pretty late and I get up pretty early, and I see your posts come through at my house about 4:00 in the morning. So I know when you post those. So I'm looking forward to the next one, because it's when I go to share them, I'm being really quiet, not to wake anybody up jumping on the computer.
Yeah, I was posting at 2 a.m. LA time, and that was too much. I thought, well, I don't want to get up in the morning 5 hours later and post. I want to post when it comes out. So I'll move it to 1 a.m. and then I can post before I go to bed. And then you're up anyway. So I know you're going to repost within a couple minutes.
And we're 3 hours different. So I hear it at 4 I see it at 4 a.m.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's great. This is very fun. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dave. You have yourself a wonderful night, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. If you have enjoyed this show, please consider going over to Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast outlet, leaving a rating or a review. Be sure to subscribe to make sure that you are notified when new episodes are available. Please be sure to share this podcast with your fellow Uriah Heep enthusiasts and anyone who you think would like Uriah Heep, which should be everyone. And if you are so inclined, please feel free to contribute to the Patreon account. And if you are not a Patreon subscriber, you can also pay through the PayPal link on the website listed in the show links below. I would also like to thank Uriah Heep for their very generous support of the show, and thank you guys for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Happy days!